Hello everyone, it's Anita, and in today's video I'm going to talk about all the books I read in 2020. So I read 30 books. I track all of my books on the Goodreads app. My account is always linked down below. You can follow me, you can follow each other. Okay, let's get started. The first book I read in 2020 was Les Vitamines du Soleil by Marc Dugain. So I got this from my book exchange site online. It's a novella, so it's very short. And I didn't really think much about it. I didn't know anything about the plot, and I was pleasantly surprised. The next book I read, and it's actually a film script, is Au revoir les enfants by Louis Malle. I know I should watch the film at some point, but this is so sad, and it's a true story. So this is set in a boarding school in France during World War II. Do I need to say more? And the title is Goodbye Children. Yeah, and I'm an emotional person, so I was actually crying when I read this, and I was on the train. I don't mind crying in public because I embarrass myself every day, so it doesn't really matter. You know what gets me? If you're at the end of a book or, this is a movie, and then like the last thing they show you or tell you is what happens to the people, and you read that and you're just heartbroken. I will watch the movie eventually, okay, but it's just, yeah, it's just sad. I got the next book from my uni library. It's called DNA is Not Destiny, the remarkable, completely misunderstood relationship between you and your genes. And that's just something that bothers me so much when people say things like, oh yeah, I guess because it's in your DNA or something like that. There are also a lot of racist ideas behind that, and or just completely, I don't know, weird things people believe because of DNA, or they think that DNA is responsible for that. So I found this book insightful and I would recommend it. The next book, I also don't have it with me because a friend of mine really wanted me to read it and she lent me this book. It's called Das Päckchen by Franz Hohler. That's a Swiss author. It obviously takes place in Switzerland, and yeah, so not too bad, not too bad. The next book I read was On the Road by Jack Kerouac, and this is just not it, honestly. I know a lot of people praise this and a lot of people like this because it's different. Yeah, it's different because first of all, he was on drugs when he took those trips. He was, I think, also on drugs when he wrote this. So, some of the things he says are concerning, and just his writing style. I appreciate that it's different, but it's just way too long, you know. This writing style is just exhausting. I might have enjoyed it more if it was shorter. Not my cup of tea, okay? The next book I read, or well, this is a collection of short stories, I guess, is Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote. So in this edition you get Breakfast at Tiffany's, House of Flowers, A Diamond Guitar, and A Christmas Memory. People mainly read this for Breakfast at Tiffany's. I might like this version better than the movie version, even though I love Audrey Hepburn. I mean, it's not that different. I mean, I don't want to give too much away. The next book I read is Liebesfluchten by Bernhard Schlink. So I got this at a secondhand store like years ago, and I thought I should probably read this at some point. There are different stories in here and they're good. They're actually good, and he's also the author that wrote The Reader. So yeah, I like his writing style. The next book I read was Mindhunter, Inside the FBI's Elite Serial Crime Unit. And this was actually an audiobook. I read or listened to it because I really liked the Netflix series Mindhunter, so that's why. But I was a bit disappointed. The author talks too much about himself. Also, if you watch the series or if you already know something about different, you know, serial killers, you won't learn that much from this book. The next book I read was Girl with a Pearl Earring by Tracy Chevalier, and this is historical fiction. So she basically wrote a story around this painting. You might know this. The next book was also an audiobook. It's called I'll Be Gone in the Dark, One Woman's Obsessive Search for the Golden State Killer by Michelle McNamara. And so the thing is, this woman, she actually died, and these were her notes. And so she, like the title says, was really obsessed with the Golden State Killer. She also gave him that name because he was known as two separate killers. I think the original Night Stalker and the East Area Rapist or something like that. She was really obsessed with this case. A lot of people are into true crime in the sense that they want to find out what happened and want to help, want to solve this mystery and things like that. The next book I read was Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Reni, Eddo-Lodge. Great book. Not really a lot I can add to this. I recommend it. The next book was also an audiobook. It's called 9,5 perfekte Morde by Alexander Stevens. In English that would translate to 9.5 Perfect Murders. And I didn't expect that much from it, but I was pleasantly surprised. This is from a lawyer in Germany, and he kind of talks about different cases he has been involved in or heard of or whatever, where people kind of got away with murder or might have gotten away with murder, and there's different ways you could actually get away with murder. I'm not 100% sure if this is ethical to share. I mean, some of the things were kind of obvious if you think about it, but I was surprised by some of these perfect murders. The next book I read was Nadrin Čuprija by Ivo Andrić. This is the first book from his trilogy about Bosnia. I highly recommend this. It's called, I think, The Bridge on the Drina in English. If you want to read something that's not by a Western author, then I would recommend this. If you want to find out more about Bosnia, especially during the Ottoman Empire. The camera stopped recording when I talked about this book, but the next book I read was Wow, Hundestories zum Staunen. And that was a collection of short stories from different authors that wrote about dogs. So that was cute. The next book I read, and I also borrowed that from my uni library so I didn't have it with me, was Populism, A Very Short Introduction. So I love the A Very Short Introduction series. So you can find a very short introduction about basically anything, and I think it's just a great way to get into different topics. And this one was about populism. I took a seminar on populism last semester. At the beginning of the semester I read this book just for myself. It wasn't required or anything like that. The next book I read was La Dame aux Camélias by Dumas' fils, so the son of Alexandre Dumas. I enjoyed this. It took me a second to understand why her nickname was La Dame aux Camélias, so why she had those camellias. Once I realized it, I was like, oh, that's interesting. The plot itself was good. I hate it when people create unnecessary drama, or if there's misunderstanding and you're like, can you just work through this? Can you just figure it out? Like, don't do this to me. The next book I read was The Social Construction of Reality, a treatise in the sociology of knowledge by Peter L. Becker and Thomas Luckman. This book is brilliant, okay? This is... Sorry. If you're not into sociology, you will find this boring. You will not find this enjoyable. It's not an easy read. I mean, they try to make it as accessible as possible. Also, I love the humor. Trust me, sociologists are the funniest people ever. I mean, even their dedication at the beginning is just so weird. And yeah, just what you would expect from sociologists, I guess. It's just, yeah. This was obviously educational, and yeah, but like I said, if you're not into sociology, you will hate this. So I got the next book from a friend of mine. She lent me this book. She wanted me to read this, so I read it. My friend got the translated version. So the English version is called How to Be a Good Creature. Okay. So this woman, she's always around animals, different kinds of animals. She writes about different animals, does research and stuff like that. So I liked some of these stories, but I found one chapter about an octopus concerning that was just, yeah, unethical in my opinion. And yeah, I don't want to get too much into it, so that's why I personally wouldn't recommend it. The next book I read, I got it from my uni library, so I didn't have it with me, is called Identity, A Very Short Introduction. This one's also great. So they talk about identity from different perspectives. The next book I read was The Leopard by Giuseppe Tomasi di Lampedusa. I didn't really like it at first, but once I got into it, I found it enjoyable, and that's why it gets 5 stars. The next book I read was Kabbalah und Liebe by Friedrich Schiller. It was good. I didn't find it, you know, that brilliant or anything like that. So yeah, not really know what to say. It's a play, by the way. Yeah, I should have said that. It's a play. The next book I read was an ebook, We Should All Be Feminists by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This was adapted from her TED Talk, so it's quite short, and I guess not, she couldn't, you know, articulate all her thoughts in this one talk. So I really want to read more of her work. Okay, so the next book I read was Das Kind in mir will achtsam morden. So I think this would translate to The Child in Me Wants to Murder Mindfully. So I got this as a birthday present from a friend, and I'm sorry to say that this is trash. The writing style is just lazy. There are a lot of stereotypes, and the author makes fun of environmentalists and of being politically correct. And the plot was also predictable, and it's just bad, honestly. The only reason why I gave it 2 stars instead of 1 is that he did something a bit different. This whole thing with your inner child added something to this otherwise plain story. So that's why I got 2 stars, but please, like, don't read that. Like, it's trash. I understand why someone would think that I would like it, because, oh, it has something to do with murder, that's perfect for Anita. That's just not it. I'm grateful that, you know, someone would think of me and buy me a gift for my birthday, so that was nice. I actually feel bad about it. The next book I read was Le Malade Imaginaire by Molière, and this was funny enough. Oh, this is a play, by the way. The next book I read was Avenue de Gion by Marc Dugain. So from the author of the first book I read in 2020. And this one is based on Ed Kemper, the serial killer Ed Kemper. I'm really impressed by how the author told this story. I think it would be more enjoyable if you didn't know anything about Ed Kemper, because the revelation in the end would be more shocking. Yeah, he did a great job. The next book I read was Christmas Memory by Truman Capote. I got this as an ebook and I started to read this, and I quickly realized that this story sounded awfully familiar. Why was that? Because it was in this collection here. Yeah, so I read it twice, but there were also other short stories. Some were fiction, obviously, but some of them were from his childhood, also about Christmas, or one was about Thanksgiving. But yeah, so it was yeah, nice. And the main story, A Christmas Memory, is great. If you're like me, you might shed a tear because yeah, it's also sad. The next book I read was Candide by Voltaire, and this is satire, and it's one of those books where you're reading this and you're like, okay, what else could go wrong? And then something bad happens. And I mean, it's satire. The next book I read was an ebook. It's called Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as If Your Life Depends on It by Chris Voss. So he was a former international hostage negotiator for the FBI. All his chapters start off with some hostage situation he was involved in and how he handled it, but it's basically about negotiating. I think his tips are helpful. Also, yeah, in different settings. For example, if you want to get a raise, if you want to buy a car, if you want to get promoted, if you want to close a deal, a business deal, anything basically that requires negotiation, that's where you could apply his tips. The next book I read was Nationalism, A Very Short Introduction. I didn't rate this high because this wasn't really about nationalism. It was more about how states are formed, things like that. You know, what is a nation? The nation is a social relation, motherland, fatherland, and homeland. The nation history, stuff like that. I mean, it's still interesting, but it's not really what I was looking for. And the last book I read in 2020, and yeah, that's just my humor, I'm sorry, was Pandemics. A very short introduction. Yeah, I had to do it. I'm sorry. It's basically a historical account of different diseases like the plague, smallpox, malaria, you know, influenza, obviously. It was interesting to read how people reacted back when some of this started, and how some of these diseases went away and then came back, and how people even realized how they were transmitted. At least we know more than those people back then. If you're interested in the history and also the inequality when it comes to preventing diseases, treating diseases, things like that. So this was, I think, the perfect book to end 2020. I actually read it on New Year's Eve. This is also the end of the video. I hope you found this interesting. Let me know what kind of books you read in 2020. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe to my channel if you're new here or haven't done that yet. It will really make my day. See you in my next video. Bye!